All right. Well, we are live and we have Peter Begg joining us today on 30 Food Safety. Peter, so excited to jump in. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Would love to just kick it off. Would love to hear, how'd you get into food safety?
It's a great question. I'm not a traditional quality food safety person. I actually have a degree in chemical engineering from Penn State. We are, for all those Penn Staters out there. I started out 30 plus years ago at Kraft Foods doing process engineering. So wasn't even anywhere really close to food safety at the time. But the one thing that Kraft did, the OG Kraft, I call it, the old Kraft before all the mergers and things like that. They made everyone, engineers, scientists, R&D, everyone had to take a course on microbiology and food safety. It did not matter if you were coming into the company. They made you learn about food safety, and that was really resonated in how Kraft approached quality and food safety. And it all, I believe it all started with, there was they had an ice cream novelty recall back in the mid 80s with listeria on ice cream novelty bars. And I believe there were some illnesses. And I think what that did is it really, for them at the time, set in motion, like, hey, we need to change how we're approaching this. So anyone who was involved with manufacturing, operations, engineering, R&D, we all had to take courses on food safety as we joined. Within your first year, you had a couple of different courses you had to take. And so that really set the tone for food safety. So for me, I did some process engineering, equipment installations in some of our dairy factories, grew up in the dairy business, moved over, did more product development then in the late 90s. And the way Kraft was structured, it was RD and Q, so research, development, and quality. So quality, food safety, and R&D were all part of one team. And so as I continued to progress in my career, I moved from product development, and then I was leading a team of scientists and engineers. And then eventually I led our food service research, development, and quality business. And that was like 2005 to 2008. So I was leading the person who ran quality for our away from home food service business was reported to me. And so I began to get much more ingrained and understanding. Again, as an engineer and scientist working on projects, you were involved, HACCP plans, and, talking to the quality and food safety teams at the time. But now it was directly part of my responsibilities. And so obviously I had a quick learning curve. And then in 2008, I moved full time into the quality and food safety space. So I was asked to take a international assignment. So I moved to Europe and became the director of quality for Europe for Kraft Foods. So based in Switzerland. And it was a baptism by fire. All of a sudden, you go from sort of having someone report to you to now you're the one responsible for that. And we were in all the EU countries, and when I got there, we were integrating the Lou biscuit business, and while I was there, we bought Cadbury. So the team expanded from like 25 to 100 within 3 years, and just an explosion of growth. The business doubled with the purchase of Cadbury, and the risk increased because chocolate, there's no kill step. And so now all of a sudden you obviously the cocoa beans are roasted, but once you make that chocolate, there is no kill step. So lots of learnings, lots of experiences. So that's kind of how I got into the quality and food safety space. It was kind of through the organization structure, but also as my career evolved. And then when Kraft split into two, Kraft and Mondelez, I went to the Mondelez side and had responsibility for our corporate center of excellence. So I had auditing, supplier quality, sanitation, crisis management. That's where I brought Vera in. She was led crisis management for a couple of years for us. And so, did that until I eventually went to Glanbia Nutritionals in late 2017. great experience, large dairy ingredients manufacturer. And then spent 2 years at Hearthside Foods, a contract manufacturer, and then joined Lyons just about 2 years ago. Really enjoy
Wow.
ingredient manufacturing. So, or being close to the customer, and really, we're more food service focused. So, dealing with all the quick serve restaurants, the large coffee houses, things like that. So it's really in my wheelhouse. And again, the food service role I had at Kraft, which kind of brought me into the quality food safety space for the first time, was one of my better experiences that I've had in 30 years. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the 4-minute winding road of how I got to where I'm at
No,
today.
we gotta catch everyone up to speed. That makes sense. And for you, what caught your eye about food safety and quality? Because I'm sure there's a lot of process engineers that were in that class that were like, "Oh, I'm just checking a box," or "I just
Yeah,
want to get
well,
back to what I'm supposed to do."
it's a great question. I tell people that, as an engineer, I think about solving problems, and every day in quality and food safety, there's a problem. It could be, most of them are minor, thankfully, but
Yeah.
I think the thing with quality and food safety is every day is unique. When I was
Yeah.
doing a project, sometimes the projects are a year long, 12 months, 15 months, and so not that there's not work to do, but it's kind of mundane. It's a little repetitive. You're waiting on, this person to get you this vendor to get you this order and things like that. In quality and food safety, it is real time and it's fast moving. And so for
Yep.
me, I like I like that aspect of it, the problem solving. But also, having not grown up as a microbiologist or in sort of quality assurance, I like that I was trying to bring a little bit of that balance because, you have to think with a business mindset. Even though you're running quality and food safety, you're still part of the business team and you still
Yep.
have to, do the right thing for the consumer, but also the right thing for the business. And, food safety is non-negotiable, but when it comes to quality, now you have decisions to make, like what's acceptable to the consumer. Can you rework something? All those decisions that have to be made, that with the company in mind.
Do you feel like you brought, as a maybe non-traditional path to food safety, do you feel like you brought like more of an engineering mindset kind of as an outsider
Um,
perspective, or?
well, I mean, at Mondelez, I really we when they split the company, they brought in a head of supply chain from Procter and Gamble, and he really focused on TPM, total productive maintenance, which is a lot
Yep.
about what are the critical to quality attributes. How do you drive things like 5S and lean and continuous improvement? And that was right up my alley. That spoke
Yeah.
to me, and so I do think that I've tried to take that with me as I've joined other organizations, which is that, you know, if you make and are able to, for example, center line equipment and make the same consistent, product every single day, guess what? You're not going to have quality issues. You're not going to have food safety issues. But we're still dealing with humans, and people like to tinker. People say, "Oh, I think the line runs better at this spot instead of this spot," and
Yeah.
sometimes that makes sense because of someone's experience. Other times, it can lead to challenges.
Yeah. So you love the problem solving aspect of food safety. What are, as you look back, some of the biggest challenges on the food safety quality side that you faced in your career?
Well, I mean, on the opposite side, not being a microbiologist, I have to rely on the people that are and the experts. And
Yeah.
I've been fortunate to work with a number of people over the years, people like Matilda Freund, who led micro and food safety for Kraft for a number of years. Vera is a microbiologist. I've got a great food safety person now at Lyons who has a background in micro and food safety. And so, just understanding that, you have to rely on the experts. And so for me, I know I don't know everything there is to know about microbiology. So I rely on the experts. But what I try and do then is say, okay, well, let's take all the facts. Let's get the facts on the table, because people tend to get emotional when if there's, $500,000 of product on hold. You got the finance guy
Yeah.
screaming over here. The ops people don't want to hit their metrics. And so it's like, okay, can we talk factually? Like, what are the facts? What do we know? what's truly the risk to the consumer. If there is, then it's not a question. We're going to destroy the product. But if there's not, then you start to get into the other questions you ask yourself about how you're going to handle the situation. So yeah, it's that for me has been a challenge because I'm not the expert in microbiology, but that's okay. I know
Yeah.
where the experts are.
Is there a specific example that jumps to mind when you were like, oh man, I have to, trust our microbiologist or have to corral the team together, get everyone to the table? Something that you can share?
Oh boy, there's been lots of examples. We had a situation when I was in Europe where we had, some potential salmonella in chocolate, and so really relying on the microbiologists, their understanding of potential root causes. How could this potentially have gotten into it, and then how do you mitigate it? Now, thankfully, we didn't there nothing ever got to a consumer, but it's how do you handle that situation? And in that particular instance, you can't clean chocolate with water. You got to use
Yeah.
like hot oil to clean all the pipes and things like that, and flush all the lines, and then you use like some sort of abrasive like sugar to make sure everything's clean. So there's just lots of learnings about how do you go about cleaning something like chocolate, which doesn't work well with water, which is your traditional way. Like, oh yeah, just get some hot water, some chemicals, sanitize it, and you're good to go. Well, there's certain products that water doesn't mix very well with, and so yeah. I mean, I think that was one example a long time
Yeah.
ago where it was like, wow,
And,
okay.
and you're navigating like cultural differences. You said
Oh
you had a
yeah.
merger, so you have different
Oh
teams
yeah,
that
yeah.
maybe don't
Cultural
know each other.
differences. Yeah. Well, and when English isn't the first language, I mean, you have to speak clearly. You can't use slang or euphemisms, and you have to talk slowly so that because when you're dealing with someone in like Germany or in France, they're translating into their native language while you're talking. And
Yeah.
so you have to remember that, even though English is the quote unquote business language, it doesn't matter. They're still, for many of them, translating into their native language for understanding.
Yeah. Wow. No, that makes sense. Any mistakes or regrets looking back on the food safety or quality side, or maybe just some learnings? I think it's always valuable to hear, things go right, but also everyone makes mistakes in their career.
Yeah,
Anything that jumps out?
well, I mean, I've made lots of mistakes. I have a 19 and a 21-year-old. They remind me all the time of the mistakes I make as a parent. But um, I think that I think for me, uh, some of the things as I look back, it's pushing harder on the company, um, to and it's not to say to do the right thing, but it's to make the changes necessary to move from reactive to proactive. We tend to be very reactive in food safety and quality. And so, for example, a crisis happens and all of a sudden a company, and I've been involved with this, where they'll throw a ton of resources. Oh, how many more people do you need? And what equipment changes do we need to make? But we need to be doing that ahead of time, identifying
Yeah.
the risk and making those investments in people and equipment ahead of time, not after the fact. But that tends to be the way the food industry works, and that's a little disappointing. So I think for me, as I look back in a couple of specific situations, it's like pushing harder to say, hey, we should have added 3 more resources. We should have done some of those equipment changes ahead of time before the risk emerged in that situation. And so, for example, as I've joined Lyons, I mean, one of the things right away I said to the team is we've got to build a strong culture, and you know, it's and culture is sort of the buzzword, and it's easy to say let's build a culture. It's hard to actually do, and it takes
Yeah.
time. It's not an overnight sort of thing. And so for us, our name is Lyons Magnus. We created a logo. I'll even show the logo for those who are on the thing. It says
Oh
Lyons
wow.
Food Safety. the heart of our pride, a little play on words with lion. And so we've used that as a communication vehicle to really engage the entire employee base around why food safety is important and why, you spoke earlier about, if something happens, and you gave an example. It's like, well, if you see something, not only say something, but do something.
Yeah.
Don't just let, if you see a piece of foreign material in a tank, say something to your supervisor, stop the line. Or if someone knows that a formula looks risky, are you speaking up, or are you sitting back and just letting it play out? And I think what we're trying to encourage is that no one is going to get punished for bringing something up that doesn't look right. And we just had an example last 2 weeks ago in one of our facilities where an employee saw that the wrong ingredient was brought to the cook deck where we mix all the ingredients. We celebrated that because that's what you want.
Yeah.
That's the type of culture you want, is where people are being proactive. And but it's the same thing with building an organization or making equipment changes. And so, we're working on right now an asset replacement list. Like, what are our pieces of equipment that have the potential for risk related to food safety, and how do we get them into a capital plan so that we're addressing them ahead of time, and until the proverbial, stuff hits the fan and you're dealing with an issue. Because I really think that is the key, is and I say this all the time, moving from reactive to proactive. And I'm sure every company would love to be there, and I don't know of one that I've ever worked for that is completely there, where you're always proactive and always mitigating risk ahead of time. Unfortunately, people don't let a good crisis go to waste, and that tends to be when the resources and changes are made. And again, even if you can make those incremental steps each year, it just makes you better as an organization.
Yeah. How would you convey it differently now, like you're doing at Lyons, than maybe you would have 15 years ago?
I think
Because
I think
like you said, it's
I think it's being
the
stronger
business. Yeah.
and standing, I call it standing alone, standing your ground. And if the company, listen, thankfully we work in a country where you have choice. And so if it gets to the point where you're speaking, you're putting together the data, you're saying it, and then they continue to disagree, well, you can always go work someplace else. Not that
Yeah.
I'm encouraging people to leave their jobs, but at the same time, you have to stand your ground related to what do you value, and making sure that if the company doesn't put people first, and that's both people safety and food safety, that may not be a culture you want to work at. Now, thankfully, I have that with Lyons, and I know that that's our priority, and I
Yeah.
partner with our head of operations, and we're partners in crime, in the sense that we work together to make sure that we keep our people safe and the food safe. And so you have, for me, it would be standing up, standing my ground, being probably more vocal about, like, hey, here's the absolute things we need to do, and pushing that agenda, versus just accepting, oh, well, I'm part of a big corporate organization, and I'll tell my boss, and then it's my boss's job to push that forward. In my role,
Yeah.
it stops with me, and I report to the CEO. So thankfully he's aligned with what we want to do. But yeah, I mean, at some point in your career, when you get to certain roles, it's you. There's no one else
Yeah.
you can go tell to, hey, can you go get this done for me, or can you push this forward? And so that's just some of the learnings I've had over the last decade or so.
Yeah. Never hurts to push a bit harder when you're doing it with data and pushing for being proactive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, as I said, speak with facts, not emotion.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. What would you say in your career is like a time where, like your Hall of Fame moment in food safety? Was it establishing food safety culture? Was it being in Europe? What do you look back on and be like, oh, this was a time where I really helped move to more proactive from reactive?
Yeah, boy. I mean, I look at what we're doing at Lyons, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done. Even looking at our time at Mondelez, we really did I thought a fantastic job of building up. We had 130 factories, a couple thousand suppliers, and so building taking a global organization and getting everyone rallied around this whole notion of consumer inspired quality, and how do you put the consumer first when you're a CPG company, and making sure that everyone understands like how you want to run your business. I think was something that was we at the time that we had Vera, we had created a small team that really worked on that aspect of it. Like, how do we raise the floor of all of our factories across the world? So we created almost like a little SWAT team that really went out and helped those plants that were maybe not as mature from a food safety and quality standpoint, and raise their level, raise their game. And there was one factory in India, specifically, that this small team that was part of my organization at the time, they had one of the worst audits I had ever seen, like literally. I won't go into gory details, but let's just say there were a number of criticals. An auditor would have been floored. By the time a couple of years later, with a number of organization changes in the facility, but also just teaching them what good looks like, that factory got a really good audit 3 years later. And that is when you're proud as someone in quality and food safety, that you can take a factory that literally was a high risk factory that had a lot of challenges, and really raise it up to the point that you'd almost put it up against some of your best factories around the world. That's a very proud moment.
Yeah. How did you navigate that? Because I'm sure sometimes the corporate plant level, there's sometimes tensions. What do you think helped that conversation go well?
Partnering with the supply chain leader for not only the person who led supply chain globally, but also for that particular region, and partnering with my boss who led research, development, and quality. And she was awesome. She ran quality for a number of years, woman by the name of Jean Spence. She ran quality for Kraft for I think 5 or 6 years, and then moved into leading the overall research, development, quality organization. She didn't take kindly to people that said no when it came to food safety. And so having her support to say, no, we will fix this. There is no other option. There isn't no, well, we'll get to it, or let me tell you all the reasons why we can't get there in this factory. No, I mean, that was unacceptable. And so basically it was, let's put the plan together and let's go execute that plan. And as an engineer, that's good for me. I like it. Let's get a plan together. What are the resources? What are the changes that we need to make? And again, partnering with the cross-functional people in operations, supply chain, got it done. And again, it was people changes, it was program changes, and it was investments. I mean, we made a number of investments in the factory as well. And so, I always say, if you can get that right, it starts with people. You got to get the right people. Then you build the strong programs, but it's underpinned by the culture. If you get all three of those right, you can build a really strong organization around food safety.
Yeah, that's awesome. As you're kind of thinking now, maybe transitioning in your career to more of like a global perspective, what would you say is your hottest take in food safety? Do you have anything now that you're like, man, a lot of people disagree with me on this, but I really believe it?
I don't know if people disagree per se. I think I don't know if I'll call it a hot take, but it will be interesting to see how AI, artificial intelligence, impacts food safety. I think that, you read the news and it's going to solve every problem we've ever had. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. You still need people to program the AI, to create the programs that AI uses. So I think there's places for AI around data analysis, data aggregation. But as far as the actual technical knowledge to create the programs, you still are going to need people. And so I think that, we and maybe Vera will be mad for me saying this, but, we need to use AI in the right way. But it's not going to solve every problem that we've ever had.
Yeah.
And again, in the food industry, especially, you're dealing with agricultural crops. A computer isn't going to grow crops for you. It can help maybe tell you the right time to plant the crops and maybe the right location and all that, but you're still dealing with nature, you're still dealing with agriculture, and then you still need people to harvest those. Again, a AI computer isn't going to harvest the crops for you. And so I think that there is a place for AI, but I don't think it's going to solve all of our problems. We still have to engage people, win their hearts and minds, help them understand why washing your hands is important, why covering that crop up so it doesn't get contaminated with rainwater is important, and all those things that flow throughout the entire supply chain are going to remain critical, even with the advances in technology. So I don't know if it's a hot take so much as, AI is the buzzword right now, and and it's everywhere, as well as automation. But again, automation can be great, but you still need people to program it, to make sure it's running right, to verify it, because having automation that's working poorly just leads to a lot of bad product.
Totally. A lot of downtime. And so maybe your take is like, hey, AI automation are very popular, but you're more saying, how do we think about how humans and those things are going to work?
Absolutely. That intersection is going to have to be solved for us to really leverage what AI can do to help us and supplement the work that we're doing on quality and food safety.
Yeah. Are there any areas where you see it's been valuable AI for you guys? We did a poll recently in our network, and it was like 20% food safety quality people are using AI every day, and then 50% don't use it at all. So it's a pretty big gap there.
I would say that we're scratching the surface, specifically at Lyons, really around data analysis, data usage. That's where I've seen definite benefit, because we collect a ton of data. We have a lab information system. We have we use a supplier information system where we've got all 800 of our suppliers in there and all the data. And so like using AI to help you wade through all of that to really get at, like, are there things I'm missing, or are there critical things that I need to be looking at? That's where, AI can help, versus someone reading through thousands of documents, using the power of AI to look through 1,000 COAs. Maybe there's something you miss. That's where I see benefits from it. From what it can bring.
Just absorbing lots of data.
That's great. And making sense of it.
Is there anything currently in your role, or maybe in the past, that's really kept you up at night as a food safety leader?
Yeah, everything.
You're like all of it.
Anytime you're dealing with products that have inherent risks to them. So, I've dealt in the world of chocolate. I've dealt in the world of meat and fresh sandwiches. At my last role at a contract manufacturer, we were making fresh deli sandwiches. I just saw there was a recall at one of the grocery chains for some ready to eat meals. And so, and even at Lyons, we handle a lot of fruit, and, we make a lot of fruit and things like that for customers. Now, a lot of it goes through a pasteurization or a kill step, but there's still some that don't. And so those are the types of things that keep me up at night. One, because as I've learned over the last 20 years of being in the space, microorganisms don't care who you are. They're gonna find their way if you don't take the right steps to mitigate them. So I think the second thing that really keeps me up at night is how do you create a strong team and then keep them, because people are still at the heart of what we do, and making sure that you can retain your talent is probably the other thing that keeps me up at night. And so hopefully I will continue to let my team know how critical they are, and they want to stay working at Lyons.
Yeah, and I'm sure when you have a great team, it makes the first part, you sleep a little easier when you know you have a great team.
Absolutely.
That's great. And then as we're kind of wrapping up here, any technical regulatory challenges that are top of mind for you right now?
Yeah, the whole MAHA agenda. I mean, if you think about no artificial colors, which is the first sort of hot topic that's being hit on. I don't know if you saw I think it was the CEO of Sensient said, it's great in theory, but many of the ingredients require crops to be grown to make the natural colors. And so he said, if everyone switches at the same time, there's just not going to be enough supply. It's going to take 3 years of growing the right crops, getting the right acreage to grow the crops before there will be enough supply of the natural colors. And I think that the intent may be the right thing, but the execution, sometimes we run before we really think through, like, okay, what are the implications here? Well, for natural colors, there may not be enough supply of certain of those, because it's crops. You're growing crops to get the natural color. So that would be an example of one from a regulatory standpoint that's really hitting.
That you're keeping an eye on. That makes sense. And as I guess if you could give one piece of advice to next generation of food safety leaders, what would it be and why?
Well, for me personally, I think it's you have to do what you love. You know, if you're waking up and you're dreading going to work or going to the plant or going to, whatever meeting, you're probably not in the right role. And the second piece of advice would be try different things. I mean, coming out as a chemical engineer, I never thought I'd be leading quality and food safety 30 years later. But I do think there's something to be said for having a couple of different experiences in your career. Even if your passion is quality and food safety, doing something maybe in another function, whether it be R&D or engineering or operations, just to gain a little bit of that different perspective will just help you that much better as a leader later on in your career.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can always tell when a food safety person's had some production experience.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I guess last question here, Peter. This has been awesome. Really appreciate just what you've shared. But I guess for you, if you could see one person interviewed on 30 food safety, who would it be?
Great question. Well, you've already got two of the good ones with Jorge and Vera. If I were to choose someone, who would be interesting? He's retired now, but Mike Robach, who was the head of quality at Cargill. Mike's got a lot of great perspectives, and I know he's retired now, but it'd be interesting to hear his perspective now that he's retired, looking in on the industry. The other one who's always an interesting conversation is Neil Marshall, who used to work at Coke.
Okay.
And Neil's also doing a bunch of consulting this season, enjoying retirement. So those would be a couple. The other person that comes to mind is Sarah Mortimer, who was the head of quality at Land O'Lakes and at Walmart. So there's a couple of good suggestions for you of some great.
Okay, great. We'll have to track them down. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Peter. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining on 30 Food Safety.
Absolutely. Thank you.